The stars are right, and that means it's time for another episode of The Whisper in Darkness. I'm your host, the Man from Leng. Thank you very much for joining me today. On this episode, I am continuing my reviews of the player cards in the Boundary Beyond the Second Mythos pack in the Forgotten Age cycle. This time, we are taking a look at the Seeker cards. There are spoilers throughout if you care about that sort of thing. If you enjoy what you hear, like, comment, and subscribe. Seekers receive 3 cards in this Mythos pack, the same amount as Guardians, so let's get started because we've got a lot of work to do. The first Seeker card in the pack is Truth from Fiction. It's a 2-cost event with 2 intellect skill icons and the Insight trait. It has the game text, play only if there is a clue on your location. Place 2 secrets on an asset you control. Truth from Fiction has got to be one of the most narrow cards ever released for the Arkham Horror LCG. In case you are wondering, there are only 3 cards that use secrets. Forbidden Knowledge from the core set, and Archaic Glyphs Untranslated, and In the Know from the Path to Carcosa. And you're probably not going to be playing Truth from Fiction to add 2 secrets to Forbidden Knowledge. Spending 2 resources and to add 2 secrets to Forbidden Knowledge, which you can then gain 2 resources and take 2 horror, is a terrible deal. So that just leaves Archaic Glyphs Untranslated and In the Know as targets for this card. If you want to translate the glyphs, you need to take 3 actions and discard 3 cards, and each of those cards needs to have at least 1 intellect skill icon. Truth from Fiction lets you take 1 action and spend 2 resources for 2 secrets, so you'll need to take at least 1 more action and discard 1 card to finish the job. Truth from Fiction saves you an action and lets you spend resources, which, unlike cards, you do get back once you've translated the glyphs. If you're bound and determined to translate the glyphs, packing a couple copies of Truth from Fiction is probably okay. It will speed up the translation process slightly, and it does have those 2 intellect skill icons, so if you don't happen to need it for translation, you can always commit it to an investigate action, a skill test during an investigate action. Once you've translated the glyphs and upgraded them, you can safely replace Truth from Fiction with a stronger card. In the Know is the only other target for Truth from Fiction. That's kind of awkward, actually, unless you are also happen to be playing the Archaic Glyphs, since In the Know costs 1 experience point. When you start the campaign, you'll have to decide whether to include Truth from Fiction in your deck, in which case it's basically a blank card with 2 intellect skill icons until you can purchase In the Know. Or you can add it to your deck after you purchase In the Know, in which case you're spending 1 or 2 experience points to swap the card into your deck. Neither option is particularly good from a deck building perspective, but if I had to choose one, I think I'd definitely go with the first. I really don't like the idea of spending experience points to put Truth from Fiction into my deck if I did happen to pick up In the Know. In the Know enters play with 3 secrets, and honestly, I haven't played the card enough to know whether that's enough secrets to see you through to the end of a typical scenario. Now, I presume that's Minte Fan, who's in the art on Truth from Fiction, perusing her copy of The King in Yellow. If I was playing multiplayer, I could certainly see dropping Min behind a barricade, preferably the level 3 version from Return to the Night of the Zealot, so she could remain hidden from enemies, dish out skill cards with Analytical Mind, and gather clues within the Know remotely. You would probably need 2 copies of In the Know to make that strategy work. I could see playing Truth from Fiction in that type of deck to keep In the Know well stocked with secrets. Obviously, the 2 intellect skill icons are great. 3 if Min triggers her response, and Truth from Fiction is cheaper than playing a second copy of In the Know. Truth from Fiction also has the Insight trait, so you can copy it with Eidetic Memory from Dim Carcosa to gather even more secrets. In fact, I did some poking around on ArkhamDB, and N146 has basically built the deck that I described above. Entitled Clue Sniper Min, this multiplayer deck costs 20 XP and is designed to discover clues at a safe distance using In the Know, Barricade, and Deciphered Reality, a seeker event from Lost in Time and Space. The deck also includes Truth from Fiction to reload secrets on In the Know. I'll leave a link to the deck in the video's description so you can stop by ArkhamDB and read N146's piloting and upgrade advice for yourself if you're interested in taking a look at this sort of deck archetype. Presumably, we are going to receive more cards in the future that use secrets, so Truth from Fiction won't remain so narrowly focused forever. Who knows, maybe the upgrade or upgrades from Ancient Stone from the Forgotten Age Deluxe expansion will use secrets, in which case this card immediately becomes more useful. For now, Truth from Fiction targets only 2 cards, and if you're playing either Archaic Glyphs Untranslated or In the Know, Truth from Fiction is probably worth a look. Truth from Fiction is helpful if you want to translate the glyphs, but In the Know really needs to be a critical part of your strategy before you consider putting this card in your deck. And even then, you know, I'm not sure Truth from Fiction maybe is strong enough to make the cut in all of those builds. Personally, I would be very tempted to remove it in favor of a more impactful card, but like I said, I haven't played In the Know enough to know whether you start with enough secrets to make a go of it. So yeah, if you want to experiment with that truth from fiction, boy, that's a tongue twister, can certainly complement that strategy. The second Seeker card in the pack is a new skill. This is True Understanding. It has a single wild skill icon and the innate trait. It has the game text, commit only to a skill test from an ability printed on a scenario card. If this skill test is successful, discover 1 clue at your location. Now, if you're anything like me, the first time you read this card, you rushed to the Arkham Horror Rules reference to refresh your memory about the definition of scenario cards. If you didn't, don't worry, I've got you covered. Scenario cards are location, treachery, and enemy cards, as well as the cards in the Act and Agenda deck. Story assets that have encounter set symbols, such as Lita Chandler from The Gathering, are also considered to be scenario cards. Unlike traditional skills, True Understanding may be committed to a skill test only from an ability printed on a scenario card. That means you can't commit it to a skill test during an investigation, evasion, or fight action unless that action is printed on a scenario card. Examples of this include the investigation action on the ascending path in Where Doom Awaits, or the investigate action on the treachery Spires of Carcosa from the Path to Carcosa. Skill tests on treacheries are fair game too. So are skill tests on locations. We've already mentioned one, the ascending path, as well as the graveyard in Midnight Masks or Arkham Woods Unhallowed Ground, and Arkham Woods Twisting Paths in the Devourer below. However, if you are playing The Gathering, you cannot commit True Understanding to the Parlay test to take control of Lita Chandler, since that ability is not printed on either the Parlor or Lita's card. Now that we've got a better understanding of when we can commit True Understanding to a skill test, we can start to discuss what the card actually does. True Understanding has only 1 wild skill icon, but discovering a clue at your location without taking an action is a great reward, especially if that clue happens to be sitting on a High Shroud location. You can think of it as like you're kind of taking a free investigate action, and during that action you may use a skill other than intellect to pass the skill test. This is useful for, certainly useful for investigators who don't happen to be seekers and have that natively high intellect. For example, Minh Fan moves from the main path to Arkham Woods Unhallowed Ground. She needs to pass a Willpower 4 test to avoid taking a damage and a horror. If she commits True Understanding to that skill test, she can grab that clue without taking an action, which is really powerful in a scenario where speed is absolutely key to your success. Fortunately, Min's Willpower is just as good as her intellect, so her odds of grabbing that clue are about the same as those to pass an intellect skill test during an investigate action. So which investigators stand to benefit the most from True Understanding? Whenever you're discussing skills, you really need to talk about two investigators in particular, and that is Minh and SILAS Marsh. If Minh triggers her response, True Understanding will have 2 wild skill icons, which is great. If you play True Understanding in combination with Analytical Mind, Minh can commit the skill to any skill test and gather a clue at her location wherever that may happen to be, which is awfully good too. True Understanding has the innate trait, which means it's fair game for SILAS Marsh. SILAS has an intellect of 2, which makes it challenging for him to discover clues the old-fashioned way, but he can cheat one here or there if he commits True Understanding to a skill test on scenario cards. Willpower skill tests are the most common type of skill tests on scenario cards, but Silas's willpower isn't great, so he's going to be on the lookout for combat and agility skill tests, such as the agility skill test on disrupting the ritual in the Devourer below. If SILAS is going to fail the test, he can always pull True Understanding back to his hand with his response and try again at a later time. True Understanding also makes a very tempting target if SILAS pulls an Elder Sign. Suddenly, SILAS can commit True Understanding to a test from his discard pile, snatching a clue and returning True Understanding to his hand so he can repeat that process during another test, possibly picking himself up 2, 3, or even 4 free clues a game, and I think that's a very good use for this card. Of the 23 other investigators in the game, 13 of them can play True Understanding, which doesn't really narrow down the field all that much. If you focus on the investigators with above average willpower and agility, which do happen to be the 2 most common skill tests on scenario cards, you might consider playing this in Ashcan Pete, Finn Edwards, Jim Culver, or even a Zoe Samaras deck. Of the Seeker investigators, Ursula Downs is probably in the best position to take advantage of True Understanding with her above average agility. I'm also tempted to include True Understanding in Norman Withers too. Now, skill cards don't really jive with Norman's special ability, but Norman doesn't have many other ways to gather extra clues due to his deck building restrictions. So a couple copies of True Understanding may actually give him a little bit of extra speed, which is always helpful when you're trying to race to the end of a scenario. True Understanding is the first of 3 new skill cards in this pack that offer a benefit besides drawing a card like the neutral skills from the core set. And I really like what the designers have done with it. Discovering a clue without having to take an action is very strong. An investigator who commits True Understanding to a skill test can do just that. They can also use a skill other than intellect to do it, which is great for those intellectually challenged investigators, such as SILAS Marsh. There are many, many scenario cards with abilities that require skill tests, so you should be able to find at least one during a scenario that would benefit from a better understanding of the situation. The third Seeker card in the pack is a new talent for the class. This is Quick Study. It's a 2-cost asset that costs 2 experience points. It has willpower and agility skill icons and the talent trait, of course. It has the game text, as a free triggered ability, place one of your clues on your location and exhaust Quick Study. You get +3 skill value for this test. Before I review Quick Study, I feel like I need to address the elephant in the room, and that elephant, of course, is higher education, a Seeker talent from Blood on the Altar. Comparing any talent to higher education is really unfair, since higher education is about as close as the Arkham Horror LCG comes to a busted card. It provides such generous bonuses to willpower and intellect, arguably the 2 most important skills in this game, that other talents can really struggle to compete against it. I think you can make a pretty strong argument that higher education basically revolutionized the Seeker class, and it's among the first cards that you should consider spending your hard-earned experience points on. I highly doubt we will ever see another talent quite as powerful as higher education. And In fact, I really wouldn't be surprised if the designers hit higher education with the Nerf bat at some point to bring it back in line with some of the other talents in the game, maybe putting a restriction on it, limiting it to once or twice per turn or per round or something like that. Long story short, is quick study as good as higher education? Nope. But, and should you play higher education in all of your Seeker decks? Yes. And I know I certainly missed it during my recent blind playthrough of the Boundary Beyond when I took another crack at that scenario with higher education in my deck. That scenario certainly became a lot easier, and I really don't think quick study would have come anywhere close to having the same impact. With that out of the way, let's take a look at quick study. Placing a clue on a location to trigger an effect is a well-established Seeker theme at this point in the game's life cycle. Dr. William T. Mallison, a Seeker ally from Lost in Time and Space, was the first card to use this mechanic, and Mallison was quickly followed by Forewarned, a Seeker event from the Unspeakable Oath. Placing a clue on a location doesn't seem like much of a cost, especially for Seekers who have a relatively easy time discovering clues during investigate actions. However, in practice, I've found that I really loathe placing clues on locations to trigger effects. There are a couple reasons I feel this way. First off, discovering clues, especially clues at a high shroud location, usually requires an investment of cards and or resources, even for a talented Seeker. And if I spend cards and or resources to discover a clue, then place that clue back on a location, I feel like I've squandered those cards and resources. If I happen to have to place that clue back on a high shroud location, then I've really just ended up shooting myself in the foot. The other reason I don't like placing clues on locations is because discovering clues requires another precious commodity, and that is time. Whenever I have to place a clue on a location, I feel as though I'm tapping the brakes on my own tempo, which is really at odds with my play style. Quick Study does provide the largest bonus of all the talents in this Mythos pack, but I would be very reticent to play it unless I had some way of getting that clue back without having to spend extra actions, cards, or resources to do it. As many players have pointed out since this card was spoiled in FFG's preview article, Quick Study works very well with an investigator such as Roland Banks, since Roland can place a clue on his location during a fight action against an enemy, and then he can get that clue back immediately with his response after he defeats that enemy. Placing a clue on a location can also help Roland deal with his signature weakness, Cover Up, especially if Roland draws Cover Up late during a scenario when clues on locations may be in short supply. Placing a clue on a location also makes Roland's 38 special more effective. If you can place a clue on a location using Quick Study while taking a fight action with Roland's 38 special, your skill value bonus could jump to +6 from +1, which is really nothing short of amazing. I could also see playing Quick Study in a Rex Murphy deck, since Rex's response lets him discover an additional clue if he succeeds by 2 or more while investigating. Rex doesn't get the clue back immediately unless he uses Quick Study during an investigate action, but I don't really see that being a problem as long as you pay attention to Rex's positioning on the board. Rex's response is on par with higher education in terms of raw power, which leads me to believe that of all the Seekers, Rex probably has the easiest time mitigating the tempo hit that placing on a location can cause. And personally, I just wouldn't be surprised if Rex also gets hit with the Nerf bat for good measure while they tackle higher education. I think you could also make a compelling case for playing Quick Study in Ursula Downs. Ursula doesn't discover additional clues like Rex, but she does get a free investigate action each turn as long as she keeps moving. Now, there is a big difference between discovering an extra clue and taking extra investigate actions, especially if you have to move away from the location where you dropped the clue in the first place. Dropping a clue at a location does turn on fieldwork, however, so there may be something worth exploring there if you go that route with your Ursula build. Ursula's signature weakness, Call of the Unknown, also forces her to move back and forth between locations to take investigate actions. So dropping a clue, moving, and then returning to that location later to rediscover that clue isn't the worst thing in the world. And don't forget, placing a clue on a location can also turn on other cards, such as Preposterous Sketches, the Seeker event from Blood on the Altar that lets you draw 3 cards, and Inquiring Mind, the Seeker skill from Undimensioned and Unseen. If you use Quick Study during one skill test, you could set up an Inquiring Mind for another, which can be a lifesaver in certain situations. Quick Study provides the greatest skill value bonus of any of the talents in this pack, but I feel as though the price of that bonus is far too steep for investigators not named Roland or Rex. Placing a clue on a location is not something that should be done lightly, which makes me wonder how often I'd end up using Quick Study during a typical scenario. Honestly, if you are dropping a clue every round to use Quick Study, your tempo is going to take a massive hit as you try to collect all those clues again. Honestly, it's probably best I stop talking about Quick Study now, because the more I think of it, the less and less I'm starting to like this card. That's going to do it for my review of the Seeker cards in the Boundary Beyond. It's a mixed bag for Seekers in this pack. Truth from Fiction is a very narrow card that's going to find a home in only certain decks. It will be interesting to see whether the upgrade or upgrades for Ancient Stone use secrets, in which case this card's value goes up a little bit later in this cycle. I do quite like True Understanding. Discovering clues is the name of the game in the Arkham Horror LCG, so any card that lets you pick up an extra clue here or there is a welcome addition to any deck. I've run hot and cold on Quick Study since it was spoiled. Right now I'm running rather cold on it. I really don't see myself playing it outside of a Roland Banks or Rex Murphy deck, and even then I'd probably take a second look at the other talents before deciding to go with Quick Study. Placing a clue on a location is a very significant cost, and if you're placing clues at locations round after round, you are really going to hamstring your tempo, and I would hate to do that. So yeah, the Seekers they don't get all the best cards this time around, which is, I know it's a rare occasion that Seekers don't end up with the best cards in the pack. That's going to do it for my review. If you enjoy what you hear, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. If you need to contact me, I can be reached at manfromleng@gmail.com. I'm also on Twitter at manfromleng. Until the stars are right, keep your shotgun close and your elder sign closer. Take care out there, and happy investigating.